The lunchbox hit the pavement with a crack that echoed across the parking lot. 7-year-old Emma Hayes watched her sandwich tumble into a puddle, her apple rolling toward the gutter. She reached down with her only hand, her right, trying to salvage what she could before the other kids saw. But Bryce Cunningham made sure they all saw. He held his phone high, laughing, narrating for his followers. "Look at the little cripple scrambling around like a..." He never finished that sentence. 10 motorcycle engines roared to life across the street. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and stay with this story until the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Emma's story travels. The Tuesday afternoon sun beat down on Riverside Elementary's parking lot, turning the asphalt into waves of heat. Emma Hayes sat on the low brick wall near the school's main entrance, her backpack beside her, waiting for her father like she did every day at 3:15. Her left arm ended just below the elbow, had since birth, and she'd learned to do most things one-handed. Tying shoes took longer. Opening juice boxes required teeth. Carrying multiple items meant strategy. But she managed. She always managed. Emma, her teacher. Mrs. Peterson waved from the doorway. "Your dad texted. He's running 10 minutes late. You okay waiting?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Peterson." Emma's voice barely carried across the distance. "Speak up, honey. I can't hear you." "I'm fine," Emma said louder, hating how her cheeks burned. Why did adults always make her repeat herself, Mrs.? Peterson nodded and disappeared back inside, leaving Emma alone with the distant sounds of children playing on the far playground and the steady stream of parents picking up their kids. Emma pulled out her library book, a story about a girl who discovered she could talk to animals and tried to lose herself in the pages. She didn't notice the black Mercedes pulling into the lot. She didn't see Bryce Cunningham step out his designer sneakers, hitting the pavement with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. She didn't hear him say to his friend Tyler, "Watch this. This is going to be hilarious." What she did notice was her lunchbox being kicked out of her hand. Emma looked up, startled. Bryce stood over her, his phone already recording that smile on his face, the one that never reached his eyes. "Oh, sorry," Bryce said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Did I do that? My bad. Must be hard to hold on to things when you're, you know." He gestured vaguely at her left arm. Emma's throat tightened. She slid off the wall, reaching for her lunchbox with her right hand. Her book tumbled to the ground. No, let me help you," Bryce said, and kicked the lunchbox farther away. "Oops, I'm so clumsy today." Tyler laughed. "Dude, you're terrible." "What? I'm trying to help." Bryce kicked the lunchbox again. It skidded across the pavement, popped open, and Emma's sandwich spilled out into a puddle of dirty water left from the morning's street cleaning. Emma's vision blurred. "Don't cry. Don't cry. Not in front of them." "Aw, are you gonna cry?" Bryce zoomed his phone camera closer to her face. "Look at this, guys. Little Emma's about to cry because she can't pick up her lunch. That's so sad. Should we start a GoFundMe? Maybe get her a servant to carry her stuff?" "Leave me alone." Emma's voice came out as a whisper. "What was that? Sorry, I don't speak pathetic." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Bryce, man, maybe what, I'm just standing here. She's the one sitting there looking helpless." Bryce crouched down to Emma's level, his phone still recording. "You know what your problem is, Emma. You act like the world owes you something just because you're different. Nobody owes you anything. You're not special. You're just defective." The word hung in the air like poison. Emma's hand trembled as she finally grabbed her lunchbox. She shoved her ruined sandwich back inside, her movements jerky, desperate. She just wanted him to leave. She just wanted to disappear. "That's it, clean up your mess." Bryce stood still, filming. "This is going to get so many views." Across the street at the Rapid gas station, Marcus Steele Rodriguez tightened his grip on his motorcycle's handlebars until his knuckles went white. He'd stopped for gas along with 9 other members of his Hells Angels chapter on their way back from a veterans hospital visit. They'd been laughing about something he couldn't even remember what now when the scene in the school parking lot had caught his attention. "You seeing this?" Marcus said quietly. Jake "Wrench" Morrison, standing beside him at the next pump, followed his gaze. Yeah, I'm seeing it. How old you think that girl is? 7, maybe 8. Marcus watched the teenager kick the lunchbox again, watched the little girl's shoulders shake as she tried not to cry, watched her struggle to gather her belongings with one hand while the boy filmed her humiliation for entertainment. Steele. That was Tommy Bishop Walsh, the chapter president, walking over from his bike. What's going on? Marcus pointed with his chin. That. Bishop watched for exactly 10 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and started recording. Everyone stay calm. We're not doing anything yet, but we're documenting everything. Yet. Wrench raised an eyebrow. Yet. By now, all 10 members of the chapter had noticed. They stood in a loose circle around their bikes' engines, off watching. To anyone passing by, they looked like what they were, a motorcycle club taking a break. But their attention was laser-focused on the parking lot across the street. That kid's got a punchable face, muttered Danny Reaper Chen. We don't punch kids, Bishop said flatly. I know, but if we did, we don't. Emma finally managed to collect all her belongings. She clutched her lunchbox to her chest and turned to walk away toward the school entrance where she could wait inside away from Bryce and his camera. But Bryce wasn't done. Hey, where are you going? I wasn't finished. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Don't be rude. I'm talking to you. Emma tried to step around him. He moved with her, still blocking. Excuse me, Emma whispered. Excuse me, Bryce mimicked in a high-pitched voice. What are you going to do, little girl? Tell your daddy? Oh wait, your daddy's too busy being a broke mechanic to care about you. Emma's head snapped up. Don't talk about my dad. Oh, she speaks. Bryce grinned at his phone. She speaks. Did everyone hear that the cripple has opinions about her loser father? Something inside Emma cracked. She tried to push past Bryce using her shoulder, but he was 17 and she was 7, and physics wasn't on her side. She stumbled, her lunchbox falling again, and this time her knee hit the pavement hard enough to scrape skin. That's when Marcus started walking. Steele. Bishop's voice carried a warning. I'm just going to talk to him. Marcus's voice was level calm, the kind of calm that came before a storm. You sure about that? I'm sure I'm going to do something. Marcus crossed the street with long, purposeful strides. His leather vest, covered in patches and pins from 20 years with the club, caught the sunlight. His boots hit the pavement with the solid weight of a man who'd walked through war zones and come out the other side. Bryce didn't notice him until Marcus's shadow fell across both him and Emma. Hey! Marcus's voice could have cut steel. Bryce turned and his expression flickered just for a second with uncertainty. Then his entitled confidence reasserted itself. Can I help you? You can start by stepping away from the girl. I'm not doing anything. We're just talking. That, what you call it. Marcus's eyes dropped to Emma, who was still on the ground, her knee bleeding, her face streaked with tears she'd finally lost the battle against. You okay, sweetheart? Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. You don't look okay. Marcus extended his hand to her. Let me help you up. Emma hesitated, glancing between Marcus and Bryce, then slowly reached out with her right hand. Marcus pulled her up, gently steady, and Emma found herself standing behind him, his bulk between her and Bryce like a wall. Who are you? Bryce demanded. Someone who's been watching you bully a little kid for the last 5 minutes. Bully, I wasn't bullying anyone. We were just joking around, weren't we? Emma? Emma said nothing. See? She's fine. Why don't you mind your own business? Marcus took one step closer to Bryce. Just one. But it was enough to make Bryce take 2 steps back. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Emma. Then you're going to delete whatever video you just took. Then you're going to get in your expensive car and drive away. And you're never going to speak to this girl again. We clear? Bryce's jaw tightened. You can't tell me what to do. Do you know who my father is? Don't care. He's Richard Cunningham. Cunningham Development. He owns half this town. Still don't care. I could have you arrested for threatening me. Marcus laughed sharp and humorless. Kid, I haven't threatened you, but I'm about to educate you. There's a difference. Across the street, the other 9 bikers had moved closer still on their side of the road, but visibly present. Their combined attention was like a physical weight. Bryce noticed them for the first time. His face paled slightly. You guys think you're intimidating? Please, you're just a bunch of criminals on motorcycles. We're veterans, Marcus said quietly. Every single one of us served, some of us multiple tours. We've seen real violence, real evil, and we've spent the years since trying to do some good in the world to balance out the things we had to do in uniform. So when we see a privileged kid tormenting a little girl half his size for fun, he leaned in slightly. That gets our attention. I wasn't tormenting anyone. I watched you kick her lunchbox 3 times. I watched you block her from leaving. I watched you film her crying. What would you call that? Social media content. The words hung there ugly and honest. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very cold. Get in your car. Or what? Or I call the police right now and we all give statements about what we witnessed. I'm guessing cyberbullying, harassment of a minor, and depending on what's on your phone, maybe some other charges. How's that sound? Bryce's phone was still in his hand, still recording. He looked down at it, then back at Marcus. This is ridiculous. She's nobody. Why do you even care? Because somebody has to. For a long moment, Bryce just stared at Marcus. Then he turned to Emma, who was still standing behind the biker, one hand gripping the back of his vest like an anchor. This isn't over, Bryce said. Yeah, Marcus replied. It is. Bryce walked to his Mercedes, Tyler trailing behind him. They got in. The engine started with an expensive purr and the car pulled out of the parking lot faster than was safe. Marcus waited until the Mercedes disappeared around the corner, then turned to Emma. You okay? Emma nodded again, but she was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and small. What's your name? Emma. Emma what? Emma Hayes. I'm Marcus. That's Wrench Bishop Reaper, and a bunch of other guys with weird names over there. He gestured to the other bikers who waved. We saw what happened. You did nothing wrong, you understand me? Nothing. He's going to come back, Emma whispered. Maybe. But if he does, you tell someone. You tell your teacher, your parents, anyone. You don't have to deal with people like that alone. He said I'm defective. Marcus crouched down, so he was at eye level with Emma. You know what I see? I see a kid who was reading a book while waiting for her dad. I see someone who tried to handle a situation quietly, without making a scene. I see someone brave enough to stand up and tell that kid not to talk about her father. You're not defective, Emma. You're tough as hell. Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. These weren't from fear or shame. My dad's going to be here soon, she said. Good. We'll wait with you. You don't have to. Yeah, we do. Marcus stood and walked back across the street to his crew. Emma stayed by the wall, but now she didn't feel alone. The 10 bikers had moved their motorcycles into the gas station lot's viewing area, and they were clearly watching, clearly present. Bishop walked over to Marcus. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that kid's going to make this worse. Probably. I'm thinking that little girl's going to suffer for it. Yeah. I'm thinking we should keep an eye on the situation. Bishop was quiet for a moment. You know we can't get involved in everything. We're not a vigilante group. I know. But that kid called her defective like it was a joke. Like her disability made her less than human. And he filmed it for entertainment. Marcus's hands curled into fists. My daughter would have been 8 next month. Bishop's expression softened. Everyone in the chapter knew about Marcus's daughter killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago. She'd been 5. This isn't about Sarah. No, but it could be. That could have been any kid, and that teenager's going to do it again because nobody's ever told him no. So what do you want to do? I want to make sure Emma Hayes is safe. I want to make sure that entitled little punk learns there are consequences. Marcus stopped, took a breath. I want to do the thing we couldn't do for our own kids. Be there when it matters. Bishop considered this. Around them, the other members of the chapter had gathered, listening. "Show of hands," Bishop said. "Who wants to keep tabs on this situation?" 10 hands went up, all of them. "All right then." Bishop pulled out a small notebook. "Let's get what information we can. School name that kid's car plate number if anyone caught it. We do this smart, we do this legal, and we do this right. Agreed?" "Agreed," they said in unison. Across the street, a blue Honda Civic pulled into the school parking lot. A man in his 30s stepped out wearing grease-stained jeans and a work shirt with "Dave" embroidered on the pocket. His face was weathered tired, but it lit up when he saw Emma. "Baby girl!" David Hayes called out. "Sorry I'm late. Mrs. Chen needed her transmission fixed and it took longer than—" He stopped, really looking at Emma now, seeing her tear-stained face, her scraped knee, her trembling hands. "What happened?" Emma ran to him and David dropped to one knee to catch her. She buried her face in his shoulder, and her father's arms wrapped around her with the fierce protection of a man who'd already lost too much in life to lose anything else. "Emma, talk to me. What happened?" "Nothing, Dad. I just fell." David pulled back, looking at her knee, then at her face. "You fell?" "Yeah." "You're a terrible liar, you know that." "I know." David's gaze swept the parking lot, landing on the group of bikers across the street. They were watching, not hiding it. David's body tensed. Marcus saw the father's protective instinct kick in and raised one hand in a peaceful gesture. He called across the street. "Your daughter's okay, sir. Just wanted to make sure she got picked up safely." David looked from the bikers to Emma and back again. "What's going on?" "Nothing, Dad. Can we just go home?" David studied his daughter's face for a long moment. He knew she was hiding something, but he also knew pushing her wouldn't work. Emma had inherited his stubbornness, along with his dark hair and sharp chin. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll talk at home." "There's nothing to talk about." "Emma." "Please, Dad. I just want to go home." David stood, taking Emma's hand, and guided her to the car. He helped her into the passenger seat she'd insisted on sitting in front since she was 6, claiming the back seat was for babies, and closed the door gently. Before getting in himself, he looked back at the bikers. Marcus gave him a small nod. David didn't return it, but something passed between them. Father to father, warrior to warrior. A recognition that something had happened here, something that wasn't over. The Civic pulled out of the parking lot, and Emma watched through the side mirror as the 10 motorcycles grew smaller behind them. She didn't know those men. She didn't know why they'd stayed. But for the first time in months, Emma felt like maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. In the car, David kept glancing at his daughter. "You'd tell me if someone was bothering you at school, right?" "Right." "Emma." "I would, Dad. I promise." David wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her, because he was barely holding his own life together, and the thought that Emma was suffering while he was too busy working to notice, that would break him. "How was work?" Emma asked, changing the subject. David let her. "Busy. Mrs. Chen sends her love. Asked about you." "She's nice." "Yeah, she is." They drove in silence for a while, the familiar route home winding through streets David had known his whole life. Riverside was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, or at least knew of everyone. The Cunninghams owned the largest houses on the hill. The Hayes lived in a rented duplex near the river. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby girl. Do you think people are born broken, or do things break them?" David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of question is that? Just wondering. Nobody's born broken, Emma. People are people. Some of them get dealt harder hands than others, but that doesn't make them broken. That makes them survivors." "But what if you're missing something? Like literally missing a piece?" David pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face his daughter fully. "Emma Hayes, you look at me." Emma raised her eyes reluctantly. "You are not missing anything. You hear me? You are exactly who you're supposed to be. Your arm doesn't define you. It's just part of you, like your eyes or your hair or your incredibly stubborn personality that you definitely got from me. But other people see it first, before they see me. Then they're idiots who aren't worth your time. Everyone's an idiot. Enough of them are. Emma almost smiled. Almost. David wanted to push, wanted to know what had happened, who had hurt his daughter. But he'd learned in Iraq that sometimes people needed space to process before they could talk. So he put the car back in drive and finished the trip home, making a mental note to pay more attention, to ask more questions, to be more present. He had no idea that across town, Bryce Cunningham was uploading the video of Emma to 3 different social media platforms with captions designed for maximum engagement. When keeping it real goes wrong, disability humor, fail, cringe. He had no idea that within an hour, that video would have 5,000 views and climbing. He had no idea that Marcus Steele Rodriguez had Emma's school name written in his notebook and a plan forming in his mind. And he definitely had no idea that his daughter's suffering was about to become the catalyst for something much bigger than either of them could imagine. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the authorities. Sometimes it comes from 10 men on motorcycles who decided they gave a damn. That night, Emma sat at the kitchen table pushing spaghetti around her plate while David watched her from across the worn Formica surface. The duplex was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, that opened into a living room barely big enough for a couch and TV. But it was theirs, and David had worked 3 jobs to keep it that way after Emma's mother left when Emma was 2. "You going to eat that or just rearrange it?" David asked. "Not hungry." "You're always hungry after school." Emma shrugged her right hand, still moving the pasta in circles. David set down his fork. "Emma, I can't help if you don't talk to me." "There's nothing to help with." "Baby girl." "I'm fine, Dad. Really. Just tired." David wanted to push. Everything in him screamed to push. But Emma had that look on her face, the one that meant she'd shut down completely if you pressed too hard. So he did what he'd been doing for 5 years. He trusted her to come to him when she was ready. He was wrong to wait. Across town, in a house with more square footage than some apartment buildings, Bryce Cunningham sprawled across his bed, watching his phone light up with notifications. 5,000 views had become 10,000. 10,000 became 20. The comments rolled in fast and vicious. "Bro, this is savage. Why is she moving so slow? El Mayu." Natural selection at work. "This is messed up, man. Delete this. Cry more snowflakes. This is hilarious." Bryce's door opened without a knock. His father, Richard Cunningham, stood in the doorway wearing a suit that cost more than David Hayes made in a month. "Your mother says you haven't done your homework." "I'm 17. I don't need her checking my homework." "You need someone checking something because your grades are trash." Richard stepped into the room, his eyes catching on Bryce's phone. "What are you watching?" "Nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing." Bryce tilted the phone away. "Just a video I made. It's getting good engagement." "What kind of video?" "Social media stuff. You wouldn't get it." Richard's jaw tightened. "Try me." Bryce hesitated, then turned the phone around. Richard watched 15 seconds of the video, Emma struggling, Bryce's commentary, the lunchbox skidding across pavement, before his expression hardened into something Bryce had seen 1,000 times calculation. "Delete it," Richard said. "What? It's got 20,000 views." "Delete it now." "But, Bryce, I'm not asking. Delete the video." "Why, it's just a joke." Richard moved faster than Bryce expected, grabbing the phone from his hand. "Because that's not just some random kid. That's Emma Hayes, Dave Hayes' daughter. So Dave Hayes is the mechanic who reported me to the city inspector last year, cost me 3 months on the Harbor District development and 200,000 in fines." Richard's thumb moved across the screen. "And you just gave him ammunition." "I didn't give him anything. I made a funny video of his disabled daughter being bullied by my son. You think he won't use this?" Bryce sat up straighter. "Use it for what?" "Lawsuits, harassment claims, bad publicity. I'm trying to get the city council to approve the waterfront project. The last thing I need is people thinking the Cunningham family targets disabled children." "I didn't target her because she's disabled. She's just annoying." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What did I tell you about the Hayes family?" "To stay away from them. And yet here we are." "It was just one video." 20,000 people don't think it's just one video, they think it's evidence. Richard deleted the video from Bryce's account, then started going through his other social media. Did you post it anywhere else? My TikTok and Instagram. Richard deleted those too, his movements sharp and efficient. You don't talk to that girl again. You don't look at her. You don't film her. You don't acknowledge her existence. Understood? You're overreacting. I'm protecting you from yourself, like I've been doing your entire life. Richard tossed the phone back onto the bed. Stay away from Emma Hayes. He left, closing the door harder than necessary. Bryce stared at his phone, watching the notification count freeze and then start dropping as the deletions propagated across platforms. But it was too late. 20,000 people had already seen it. 20,000 people had already shared it, downloaded it, reposted it. The video was out there now, living its own life beyond Bryce's control. And Marcus Rodriguez had a copy. Marcus sat in his garage, a converted barn behind his house, with his laptop open and the video playing on repeat. Bishop sat beside him along with Wrench and Reaper. They'd been watching it for 20 minutes, analyzing every second, every word, every angle. Run it back to the part where he kicks the lunchbox the second time, Bishop said. Marcus dragged the progress bar. They watched Bryce's foot connect with the plastic container, watched Emma flinch, watched her try to make herself smaller. That's assault, Wrench said flatly. On a minor. He kicked her property toward her. That's intent to intimidate. Good luck proving that to anyone who matters, Reaper muttered. We don't need to prove it to everyone. We need to prove it to enough people. Marcus closed the laptop. I did some digging. Bryce Cunningham, 17, attends St. Augustine Preparatory Academy, that private school on the north side. His father's Richard Cunningham owns Cunningham Development. Bishop whistled low. That's a problem. Why? Because Richard Cunningham has the mayor, half the city council, and most of the police department in his pocket. You go after his son, he'll bury us. So we do nothing. Marcus's voice could have cut glass. I didn't say that. I said it's a problem. Problems have solutions. I'm listening. Bishop leaned back in his chair, thinking. We need more than one video. We need a pattern. We need to prove this isn't an isolated incident. You think he's done this before? Rich kid who talks like that. Yeah, I think he's done this before. Probably to other kids who were too scared to say anything. Marcus pulled up a fresh browser window and started typing. St. Augustine Prep. Let's see what we can find. They spent the next hour combing through social media, school newspapers, local news reports. What they found made Marcus's blood pressure rise with each click. Bryce Cunningham had a history. Not officially. Nothing on any record that mattered. But his social media was a trail of cruelty disguised as humor. Videos of homeless people he'd filmed without permission, adding mocking commentary. Photos of classmates with crude jokes written across them. Screenshots of conversations where he'd told people exactly what he thought of them. This kid's a sociopath, Wrench said. He's a product of never being told no, Bishop corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Sociopaths can't be fixed. This kid just needs consequences. Marcus opened a new document and started making notes. Times, dates, incidents, witnesses. We're going to need help with this. What kind of help? The kind that makes sure this gets seen by the right people. We need a lawyer. We need someone who knows how to navigate this without getting us arrested for harassment. I might know someone. Reaper pulled out his phone. My cousin Diane. She does civil rights law, works with disability advocacy groups. Call her. While Reaper made the call, Marcus pulled up Emma's school website, Riverside Elementary. Small public, underfunded, based on the donation requests plastered across the homepage. He found the staff directory and started reading names, looking for someone who might actually care about what was happening to one of their students. Mrs. Angela Peterson, second grade teacher. Marcus clicked on her photo, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. She was the one who checked on Emma. You think she knows what's going on? I think she knows something's wrong. Whether she knows the details is another question. Bishop stood and stretched. It's late. We should call it for tonight. You go ahead. I'm going to keep looking. Steele, you can't save every kid. Marcus looked up at his president, his friend, his brother. I know, but I can save this one. Bishop held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Keep me updated, and don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that gets you arrested or makes the news. I'll do my best. After the others left, Marcus sat alone in his garage with the hum of the space heater and the glow of his laptop screen. He pulled up the video one more time, watching Emma's face, seeing the exact moment her spirit broke. His daughter Sarah had made that same expression once. 3rd grade. A boy had made fun of her diabetes, called her a pincushion because of her insulin injections. Sarah had come home crying, and Marcus had stormed into that school ready to tear the world apart. The principal had handled it. The boy had apologized. Everything had been fine. 2 years later, Sarah was dead, and Marcus would give anything to go back to that moment in the principal's office when his biggest problem was a bully who'd learned his lesson. He couldn't save Sarah. But Emma Hayes was alive and she was suffering, and Marcus was going to do something about it. The next morning, Emma woke up to find her phone. The basic model David had gotten her for emergencies flooded with messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Is this the girl from the video? Your famous LOL? How does it feel being a meme? You should sue that guy. Kill yourself, cripple. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled through the messages. How did they get her number? How did they even know who she was? Emma, breakfast. David called from the kitchen. She deleted the messages quickly, cleared her notifications, and went downstairs. David had made pancakes her favorite, which meant he was still worried about yesterday. Morning, baby girl. Morning. Sleep okay? Fine. Emma sat down at the table and poured syrup over her pancakes in a perfect spiral. It was a routine they'd developed when she was 4. She did the syrup because she could do it herself, and David never interfered with things Emma could do herself. You got school pictures today, right? David asked. Emma had forgotten. School pictures meant sitting in front of a camera, meant having to figure out where to put her left arm, meant other kids staring and whispering. I don't want to take pictures. Why not? I just don't. Emma, can I skip them? Please. David studied his daughter over his coffee mug. What's going on with you? Nothing. You don't want to eat. You don't want to take pictures. You barely talked all yesterday evening. That's not nothing. I'm just tired. Of what? Everything Emma wanted to say. I'm tired of being different. I'm tired of being stared at. I'm tired of people like Bryce Cunningham thinking I'm easy entertainment. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. But she didn't say any of that. She said school stuff, tests and whatever. David didn't believe her. Emma could tell by the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers drummed against his mug. But he didn't push, and Emma was grateful for that. At school, Emma kept her head down and avoided the main hallways. She'd gotten good at making herself invisible over the years. Small, quiet, unremarkable, except for the one thing she couldn't hide. Mrs. Peterson found her at morning recess sitting alone under the oak tree with her book. Emma, honey, can we talk? Emma looked up. I didn't do anything wrong. I know you didn't. I just want to check on you. Mrs. Peterson sat down on the grass, something she didn't have to do, but Emma appreciated. You seemed upset yesterday when your dad picked you up. I'm fine. You keep saying that word. I'm not sure it means what you think it means. Emma almost smiled. Mrs. Peterson was always quoting movies, trying to connect with her students through pop culture references that were usually too old for them to get. Seriously, Emma, if something's bothering you, you can talk to me. What would happen if someone was being mean to me? Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted from casual concern to focused attention. What kind of mean? Just mean. Saying stuff. Doing stuff. Who's being mean to you? Emma hesitated. Telling meant making it real. Telling meant starting something she couldn't control. Nobody. I was just asking hypothetically. Emma, I have to go to the bathroom. Emma stood quickly, grabbing her book. She walked away before Mrs. Peterson could stop her, but she felt her teacher's eyes following her across the playground. In the bathroom, Emma locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone. More messages had come in during class. She scrolled through them, her stomach twisting tighter with each one. Then she saw it, the video. Someone had sent her the link with the message, "This you." Emma watched herself on screen, watched her lunchbox fly, watched herself scramble, watched Bryce's face laughing, mocking, enjoying her humiliation. She watched the view count 47,392. 47,000 people had seen the worst moment of her life. Emma threw up in the toilet. She stayed in that stall for 15 minutes, shaking, crying as quietly as possible. When she finally came out, she washed her face with cold water and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked small, scared, broken, defective. "No," Emma whispered to herself. "You're not defective." But she didn't believe it. Across town at St. Augustine Prep, Bryce was being called into the headmaster's office. He walked down the polished hallway with its mahogany panels and pretentious oil paintings, wondering what he'd supposedly done now. Headmaster Whitmore sat behind his massive desk, his expression grave. "Mr. Cunningham, please sit." Bryce sat, arranging his face into polite attention. "I've received several complaints about a video you posted online. I deleted it. After it was viewed over 40,000 times, yes. It was just a joke. It was cyberbullying of a 7-year-old child with a disability." Bryce's jaw tightened. "She's not a child. She's just short for her age." "She's 7, Bryce. That makes her a child. And the content of that video violates our code of conduct regarding digital citizenship and respect for others. It happened off campus. You don't have jurisdiction. We absolutely have jurisdiction over behavior that reflects poorly on this institution. You're wearing our uniform in every photo on your social media. You represent St. Augustine whether you're on campus or not. So, what, you're going to suspend me over a stupid video?" Whitmore steepled his fingers. "I'm considering it. However, your father has already called me this morning. He's proposed an alternative." "Of course he did. Richard Cunningham solved everything with money and connections." "What alternative?" "Community service. 50 hours working with disabled youth at the Riverside Disability Resource Center." Bryce nearly laughed. "You're joking." "I assure you I'm not. That's ridiculous. I didn't even do anything that bad. You filmed a child in distress and posted it publicly for entertainment. You mocked her disability. You used language that multiple advocacy groups have classified as hate speech. The only reason we're not expelling you outright is because your father has been a generous benefactor to this school. So this is about money. This is about consequences. You have 2 choices. Accept the community service or accept a 2-week suspension that will appear on your permanent record and potentially affect your college applications." Bryce wanted to argue, wanted to tell Whitmore exactly where he could shove his community service. But he'd been groomed since birth to understand power dynamics, and right now Whitmore held the power. "Fine. I'll do the community service." "Excellent. You start Monday after school. Mrs. Chen at the Resource Center is expecting you." "Can't wait," Bryce said flatly. He left the office seething. This was ridiculous. All of this over some nobody kid who couldn't take a joke. His father had overreacted. The school had overreacted. Everyone had overreacted. Bryce pulled out his phone and opened his messages. Tyler had sent him a link. "Dude, check this out." It was the video again, but this time on a different platform. Someone had reposted it with new text. "Rich kid bullies disabled girl. Let's make him famous for the right reasons." The comments were different on this version. Angry. Calling for his name, his school, his address. Someone had already identified St. Augustine Prep from his uniform. "You get what you deserve, rich boy. Hope someone treats your kids like this someday. Somebody find this guy. Delete your account and yourself." Bryce's hands tightened on his phone. This was getting out of control. His father had said deleting it would make it go away, but it wasn't going away. It was spreading, mutating, becoming something else entirely. And somewhere in that comment thread, Marcus Rodriguez was taking screenshots. Marcus sat in a Starbucks across from Riverside Elementary watching the school entrance through the window. He'd been there since lunch, nursing the same coffee for 2 hours, waiting. At 3:15, kids started flowing out of the building. Marcus scanned each one until he spotted Emma, small, dark-haired, her right hand clutching her backpack strap while her left arm hung at her side. She walked alone to the same brick wall where she'd waited yesterday, sat in the same spot, pulled out the same book. Marcus watched her for 10 minutes. No other kids approached her. No one waved or said goodbye. Emma Hayes existed in a bubble of isolation, and Marcus knew that kind of loneliness. He'd felt it after Sarah died, that sense of being separated from the rest of humanity by grief. A blue Honda pulled into the lot. David Hayes got out, and Emma's face transformed just for a second into something lighter. Then she caught herself, pushed it down, became carefully neutral again. Marcus made a note. Emma hides her feelings from her father. He watched them drive away, then pulled out his phone and called Bishop. "You stalking that kid now?" Bishop answered. "I'm observing the situation." "Steele, that's stalking." "It's reconnaissance, and I found something." "What?" "Emma Hayes doesn't have any friends. She sits alone at recess, eats alone at lunch, waits alone after school. That's not normal for a 7-year-old. Maybe she's just shy. Maybe. Or maybe Bryce Cunningham isn't the first person to make her feel like she doesn't belong." Bishop was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to talk to the father." "That's a terrible idea." "Why?" "Because we're a motorcycle club showing up at a veteran's house to tell him his daughter's being bullied. He's either going to tell us to get lost, or he's going to grab a weapon. Possibly both. Or he's going to listen because we're the only people who seem to give a damn. Steele, I'm going to talk to him, with or without the club's support." Bishop sighed. "If you're doing this, you're not doing it alone. I'll come with you." And Wrench, because he's good at de-escalating situations. "When?" "Tonight, after he gets home from work. We show up in daylight, unarmed, hands visible. We don't want him thinking this is a threat. It's not a threat, it's an offer to help. Let's hope he sees it that way." That evening, 3 motorcycles pulled up in front of the Hayes duplex at 6:47 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked driveway. David's Honda sat in front along with a work van from the auto shop. Marcus, Bishop, and Wrench removed their helmets and approached the front door. Marcus could see curtains moving in the window. Someone was watching. He knocked 3 times. The door opened, but only a crack. David Hayes stood in the gap, his body blocking the entrance, his expression wary. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Hayes, my name's Marcus Rodriguez. We met briefly yesterday at your daughter's school. These are my friends Bishop and Wrench. We'd like to talk to you about Emma." "What about Emma?" "About what happened in that parking lot, and about what's been happening to her for a while now." David's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you know something's wrong, but Emma won't tell you what it is." "How do you know my daughter's name?" "Because we were there yesterday when Bryce Cunningham kicked her lunchbox across the pavement and filmed her crying for social media. And we're here now because we want to help." David stared at them for a long moment. Marcus could see the calculation in his eyes, veteran to veteran, assessing threat level, determining intent. Finally, David opened the door wider. "You've got 5 minutes." They stepped inside. The duplex was small but clean, with military precision in its organization. Photos lined one wall. David in uniform, a younger David with a woman who must have been Emma's mother, and dozens of Emma at various ages. "Emma's upstairs doing homework," David said quietly. "Keep your voices down." "Understood." Marcus handed David his phone with the video queued up. "Have you seen this?" David watched. His face went through a series of emotions. Confusion, recognition, fury. "When was this taken?" "Yesterday. Right before you arrived." "That's the Cunningham kid." David's voice was flat, dangerous. "Richard Cunningham's son. You know him. I know his father. We have history. Bad history. The worst kind. I reported him for safety violations that almost got people killed, cost him money and time. He's been trying to get me fired ever since." David looked up from the phone. "Is that why his son is targeting Emma revenge? Possibly. Or maybe he's just a bully who found an easy target." David's hands curled into fists. "Where does he live?" That's not why we're here, Bishop said quickly. We're not vigilantes. We're here to help you handle this the right way. The right way, David repeated. What's the right way when someone hurts your kid? We document everything. We gather evidence. We make sure everyone who needs to see this video sees it. And we make sure Emma knows she's not alone. Marcus met David's eyes. We served same as you. We know what it's like to feel like nobody's watching your back. We're here to watch Emma's back. Why you don't know us? Because somebody has to. And because yesterday I saw my daughter in your daughter's face and I couldn't walk away from that. David studied Marcus for a long moment. Your daughter? Sarah. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. She was 5. I'm sorry. Me too. Marcus took a breath. Look, I know this sounds crazy. Random bikers showing up at your door saying they want to help. But I'm asking you to trust us. Because Emma's situation is worse than you think, and it's going to get worse if someone doesn't step in. How much worse? Marcus showed him the phone messages, the reposts, the spreading video, the comment threads. Showed him Emma's face in every frame, showed him how 47,000 people had turned his daughter's worst moment into entertainment. David's face went pale. She knows about this. If she has a phone, she knows. She has a phone. David moved toward the stairs. Emma. Dad. Emma's voice floated down small and uncertain. Come down here, please. There was a pause, then footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared, saw the 3 bikers in her living room, and froze. Baby girl, have you been getting messages on your phone? Emma's face told David everything he needed to know. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to worry. You're already working so much and I didn't want to make things harder. Emma. David crossed to her, dropped to one knee. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. You understand me. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Let me see your phone. Emma handed it over with shaking hands. David scrolled through the messages, his expression darkening with each one. When he reached the death threat, his hands started trembling. How long has this been going on? Since last night. And the stuff with Bryce in person. Emma looked at the floor. A couple weeks. A couple weeks. David's voice was barely controlled. What's he been doing? Just stuff. Mean stuff. It's fine. It's not fine. None of this is fine. David looked at Marcus. What do you need from me? Permission to help. Permission to document what's happening and make sure the right people know about it. Permission to make sure Emma's safe at school. You want to follow my daughter around. We want to make sure she's not alone. That when Bryce Cunningham or anyone else tries something, there are witnesses who will actually do something about it. David looked at Emma, then back at the bikers. You're really serious about this? Dead serious. Why? Because we can, Bishop said simply. Because we've got time and resources and a deep dislike for people who hurt kids. And because if we don't help Emma, who will? David was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to Emma. What do you think, baby girl? You okay with these guys looking out for you? Emma studied the 3 men. They were big and scary looking with their leather vests and tattoos, but they'd also been the only people who'd stood up for her when Bryce was being cruel. And Marcus had called her brave. Okay, Emma whispered. Okay, David echoed. He extended his hand to Marcus. But if anything happens to her, it won't. Marcus shook his hand firmly. You have my word. As the 3 bikers left, Marcus paused at the door. Mr. Hayes, one more thing. What? Emma's stronger than you think. Don't underestimate her. David looked at his daughter standing small and scared in their tiny living room and wanted to believe Marcus was right. He had no idea how right Marcus would turn out to be. The next morning, Marcus sat in his truck across from Riverside Elementary at 7:30 a.m. He'd been there since 7 years, watching the drop-off line, memorizing patterns. Bishop and Wrench were positioned at the coffee shop 2 blocks away, ready to move if needed. David's Honda pulled up at 7:42. Emma stepped out, her backpack slung over her right shoulder, her face carefully blank. David said something through the window. Marcus couldn't hear what, and Emma nodded before walking toward the entrance. She made it 3 steps before another car pulled up fast, tires squealing slightly. The black Mercedes. Bryce Cunningham stepped out, his eyes locked on Emma. Marcus's hand moved to his door handle. Bryce walked straight toward Emma, his phone already out. "Hey, cripple, miss me?" Emma kept walking faster now. "I'm talking to you." Bryce moved to block her path just like before. "You got me in trouble. You know that 50 hours of community service because of your pathetic crying." Emma tried to go around him. He stepped with her, maintaining the block. "My dad had to call the school. Do you know how embarrassing that is? All because you can't take a joke. Leave me alone." Emma's voice was stronger than yesterday, but still quiet. "Or what you'll tell your daddy." "Oh wait, you already did. And look, he sent babysitters." Bryce gestured toward Marcus's truck. "That's supposed to scare me. Some random biker." Marcus got out of his truck. He didn't rush, didn't run, just walked with steady purpose across the parking lot. Bryce saw him coming and his confidence flickered. "This is harassment. I could call the cops." "Call them." Marcus stopped 5 feet away, his hands visible at his sides. "I'd love to explain to the police why you're blocking a 7-year-old from entering her school." "I'm not blocking anyone. We're just talking." "She asked you to leave her alone. That's not a conversation." Other parents were starting to notice now. Phones came out, not filming Bryce and Emma this time, but ready to document whatever happened next. Bryce felt the shift in attention, and his jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." Marcus's voice carried across the lot, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You don't talk to her. You don't look at her. You don't film her. You stay 50 feet away from Emma Hayes at all times, or every parent here is going to know exactly what kind of person you are." "They already know. They don't care." "Try me." Bryce looked around at the watching parents at their phones at the gathering crowd. He'd been taught by his father to recognize when a situation had turned against him. Whatever. She's not worth it anyway. He walked back to his Mercedes, got in, and drove away too fast for a school zone. Emma stood frozen, her whole body trembling. Marcus crouched down to her level. "You okay?" "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." "Smart rule. But I talked to your dad last night. Remember, I'm not a stranger anymore. I'm just someone who gives a damn." "Why?" "Because that's what people do. They show up when it matters." Mrs. Peterson appeared at the school entrance. "Emma, are you all right?" "She's fine," Marcus said, standing. "But you might want to know that Bryce Cunningham just harassed her in your parking lot. Again." Mrs. Peterson's face tightened. "I'll report it to the principal." "See that you do, because if this keeps happening, I'm going to start asking why your school can't protect a 7-year-old from a teenager who doesn't even attend here." Emma hurried inside, and Mrs. Peterson followed after giving Marcus a long, measuring look. Marcus walked back to his truck, pulled out his phone, and texted Bishop. "Contact made. Cunningham kid showed up. Multiple witnesses this time." Bishop's response came immediately. "Good. Let him make mistakes." At St. Augustine Prep, Bryce slammed into his first period class 15 minutes late. His teacher, Mr. Holbrook, looked up from the board. "Nice of you to join us, Mr. Cunningham." "Traffic." "Right, take your seat." Bryce dropped into his chair next to Tyler, who leaned over and whispered, "Dude, you look pissed." "That biker was at the elementary school." "What biker?" "The one from yesterday. He's following me." Tyler's eyes widened. "That's stalking." "That's what I said." "Did you tell your dad?" "And say what?" "That I'm being intimidated by some random guy on a motorcycle because I made a video. My dad will just say I deserved it." "Did you?" Bryce turned to stare at Tyler. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm just saying, man. That video was pretty harsh, and she's like 7. "Since when do you care?" "Since 50,000 people started calling us psychopaths in the comments." Bryce opened his phone under the desk and scrolled through his mentions. Tyler was right. The video had taken on a life of its own, and Bryce had become the villain in a story he hadn't meant to tell. Forget them. They don't know anything. But Tyler's expression said he wasn't so sure anymore. At lunch, Bryce sat alone. Tyler had found an excuse to eat with other friends, and the rest of their usual group seemed to have scattered. Bryce ate his catered lunch from the prep school's premium menu and pretended not to notice the whispers at surrounding tables. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. "Office. After school. We need to talk." That couldn't be good. Across town at Riverside Elementary, Emma sat in the cafeteria with her lunch, a sandwich David had packed that morning, cut into quarters so she could eat it one-handed. She was reading her book, trying to be invisible, when a shadow fell across her table. "Can I sit here?" Emma looked up. A girl from her class, Mia Chen, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, stood holding her lunch tray. "I guess," Emma said, surprised. Mia sat down across from her. "I saw what happened this morning with that teenager." "Oh. He's mean." "Yeah. My grandma says mean people are just scared people who don't know how to ask for help." Emma considered this. "I don't think he's scared of anything. Maybe he's scared of not being important. My grandma says that's the worst fear for some people, being ordinary." Emma had never thought about it that way. "Your grandma's pretty smart." "She is. She also said you're brave." "Me. For standing up to him, even though he's bigger." "I didn't stand up to him. I just tried to get away." "That's still brave. Not everyone would even try." Mia opened her milk carton. "Want to play tetherball after lunch?" Emma hadn't been asked to play anything in months. "Okay. Cool." It was a small thing, sharing a lunch table and a game of tetherball. But for Emma, it felt like the first crack in a wall she'd been trapped behind for too long. At 3:00 p.m., Marcus was back in position across from the school. This time, he wasn't alone. Bishop Wrench Reaper and 3 other chapter members had joined him, their motorcycles lined up like a statement. The black Mercedes didn't appear. David picked Emma up at 3:15, and she actually smiled when she got in the car. David noticed immediately. "Good day. Better than yesterday." "Yeah. I made a friend. Her name's Mia." David's chest tightened with relief he didn't know he'd been holding. "That's great, baby girl. And Bryce didn't bother me after this morning." "What do you mean, after this morning?" Emma's smile faded. "He was there at drop-off, but Marcus made him leave." David glanced in his rearview mirror at the line of motorcycles. "Yeah, he did." At Cunningham Development's downtown office, Bryce sat in the leather chair across from his father's massive desk and waited for the lecture. Richard stood at the window overlooking the city, his back to his son, silent. The silence was worse than yelling. "Dad, I got a call today from Headmaster Whitmore." Richard's voice was controlled, which meant he was furious. "Apparently you approached Emma Hayes this morning at her school." "I just talked to her." "You blocked her path and harassed her in front of multiple witnesses." "That's not what happened." "That's exactly what happened. I have 3 different videos from 3 different parents." Richard turned around, his face cold. "What part of stay away from her did you not understand? She got me in trouble. I was just..." "You got yourself in trouble. You filmed yourself bullying a disabled child and posted it publicly. Everything that's happened since is a direct result of your choices. You told me to be confident. You told me never to back down. I told you to be smart." Richard's control finally cracked. Confidence without intelligence is just arrogance, and arrogance gets you destroyed. You think I built this company by making enemies of people for no reason. You make enemies all the time. Strategic enemies. People who stand in the way of business goals, not random 7-year-olds whose fathers already hate me. Richard moved to his desk, pulled up something on his computer, and turned the screen toward Bryce. "Do you know what this is?" Bryce looked at the screen. It was a web page for Riverside Disability Resource Center with a news article attached. Local business owner donates $50,000 to disability advocacy following viral bullying incident. "Who donated?" Bryce asked. "I did, in your name, because that's how we fix this. We don't make it worse by harassing the girl again. We make a public show of supporting disability rights. We complete your community service quietly, and we wait for people to forget." That's fake. That's survival. and you're going to learn the difference. I'm not apologizing to her. Yes, you are. Publicly. At your community service orientation on Monday. Dad. This isn't a negotiation, Bryce. You're 17 years old. In 1 year, you'll be an adult, and these mistakes will follow you forever. Right now, I can still fix this, but only if you do exactly what I tell you. Bryce wanted to argue. Wanted to tell his father that he was being ridiculous, that Emma Hayes didn't matter, that this whole thing was blown out of proportion. But Richard Cunningham had a look on his face that Bryce had learned to recognize, the look that meant the conversation was over. Fine, Bryce said. I'll apologize. Good. Now get out. I have actual work to do. Bryce left the office, his hands clenched into fists. The apology would be fake, mechanical, meaningless. But he'd do it because he had to, and then he'd figure out a way to make Emma Hayes sorry for ever existing. That evening, Marcus gathered the chapter at his garage. All 10 members were present, along with Bishop's cousin, Diane, the civil rights attorney, who'd driven in from the city. Diane was a small woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades fighting battles most people didn't even know existed. She sat at Marcus's workbench reviewing the documentation they'd compiled over the last 48 hours. This is good work, she said finally. You've got the original video, the reposts, the threatening messages to Emma, witness statements from the parking lot incidents, and now video evidence of continued harassment despite warnings. So we can do something with it, Marcus asked. We can do several things with it. File a restraining order on behalf of Emma. Submit a formal complaint to the school board about inadequate protection of a student with disabilities. Contact the State Disability Rights Office about potential civil rights violations, and possibly pursue charges of cyberbullying and harassment. How long will all that take? Months, maybe longer. The system moves slowly, especially when you're going up against money and influence. That's too long. Emma's suffering now. I know. Which is why we need to apply pressure from multiple directions at once. Diane pulled up a document on her laptop. I've drafted a letter to the superintendent, the school board, and the mayor outlining the situation and demanding immediate action. I'm also contacting several disability advocacy organizations that have media connections. If we can get this story picked up by the right outlets, public pressure might move things faster than legal channels. Bishop leaned forward. You think the news would care about a rich teenager systematically tormenting a disabled child while schools do nothing? Yes, especially with video evidence. This is exactly the kind of story that gets traction. Emma's going to be exposed, Wrench said. Her face, her name, everything. Is that fair to her? No, Diane admitted. But the alternative is letting this continue until something worse happens. And trust me, it will get worse. Bullies like Bryce Cunningham escalate until someone stops them. Marcus thought about Emma's face in the cafeteria, the way she'd tried to make herself small and visible. We need to talk to her father first, and Emma. They should decide if they want this public. Agreed. Diane closed her laptop. Set up a meeting. I'll explain the options, and they can choose how to proceed. The meeting happened 2 days later at the Hayes duplex. David, Emma, Marcus, Bishop, Diane, and Mrs. Peterson, who'd asked to be included, all crowded into the small living room. Emma sat next to her father, her right hand clutching his, her face pale but determined. Diane explained everything carefully, making sure Emma understood what it would mean if they went public. Your face would be in the news. People would know your name. Some of them would be supportive, but some would be cruel. The internet isn't kind even to people who are clearly victims. It's already not kind, Emma said quietly. People already sent me mean messages. At least this way, maybe it means something. David squeezed her hand. You don't have to do this, baby girl. We can try other ways. What other ways? Talking to the principal. That didn't work. Telling teachers that didn't work. Everyone keeps saying they'll handle it, but nobody does. Emma's voice was getting stronger. I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. If telling my story helps, then I want to tell it. Mrs. Peterson wiped her eyes. Emma, you're 7 years old. You shouldn't have to fight this battle. But I'm already fighting it, every single day. At least this way I'm not fighting alone." The adults in the room exchanged looks. Marcus saw in their faces what he was feeling, a mixture of heartbreak and pride that a child should have to be this brave. "If we do this," David said slowly, "we do it right. We control the narrative. We make sure Emma's protected as much as possible." "Agreed," Diane said. "I have a contact at Channel 7. Stephanie Wright. She does investigative pieces on social issues. She's fair, she's thorough, and she won't exploit Emma for ratings." "Set it up," David said. Then he turned to Emma. "You sure about this?" Emma nodded. "I'm sure." "Then we fight." The interview was scheduled for Monday afternoon, the same day Bryce was supposed to start his community service. Diane had timed it deliberately. She wanted the story to break, while Bryce's apology was still fresh, making it impossible for the Cunninghams to claim he'd already made amends. Channel 7 sent Stephanie Wright and a small crew to the Hayes duplex. Stephanie was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a reputation for holding powerful people accountable. She sat across from Emma and David, the camera positioned to show Emma in soft light, her face clear but not harsh. "Emma, thank you for talking to me today," Stephanie began. "I know this isn't easy." "It's okay. Can you tell me what's been happening at school?" Emma took a breath and started talking. She told the story from the beginning, the first time Bryce had knocked her books from her desk during his volunteer hours, the comments about her disability, the escalating harassment. She described the parking lot incident, the video, the messages that followed. She didn't cry. Her voice stayed steady, and she looked directly at the camera when she said, "I just want him to leave me alone. I just want to go to school without being scared." David spoke next, his voice rough with barely contained anger. "My daughter is 7 years old. She has one hand and she's learned to live with that. What she shouldn't have to live with is being terrorized by a teenager who thinks disability is funny. I served 2 tours in Iraq protecting people's freedoms. I never thought I'd come home and have to protect my own daughter from someone in her own community." Stephanie turned to the camera. "We reached out to St. Augustine Preparatory Academy and the Cunningham family for comment. The school provided a statement saying they take all allegations seriously and that appropriate disciplinary action has been taken. The Cunningham family declined to comment. However, we've obtained video footage of the incidents Emma described, and we want to warn viewers that the content may be disturbing." The original video played Bryce kicking Emma's lunchbox, his mocking commentary, Emma's tears. Then the parking lot footage from that morning showing Bryce blocking Emma's path, Marcus intervening. "That man," Stephanie said as Marcus appeared on screen, "is Marcus Rodriguez, a Marine Corps veteran and member of a local motorcycle club. He witnessed the initial incident and has since taken it upon himself to ensure Emma's safety." The story aired that night at 6:00 p.m. By 6:30, it was trending on social media. By 7:00, national outlets were picking it up. By 8:00, the Cunningham Development Office phones were ringing non-stop. Richard Cunningham watched the broadcast in his home office, his face expressionless. When it ended, he called Bryce into the room. "Sit down." Bryce sat, his stomach nodding. He'd seen the broadcast too. "Do you understand what you've done?" Richard's voice was quiet, deadly. "You've made our family the face of disability discrimination. You've potentially cost me millions in contracts. You've given every enemy I have in this town ammunition to use against me. Dad, I didn't. You didn't think. That's your problem. You never think past the next 5 minutes." Richard stood and walked to his liquor cabinet, poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. "I can't protect you from this. Not anymore. This is too big, too public. You're going to have to face consequences for once in your life." "What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow you're going to go to that resource center and you're going to do your community service. Not because the school requires it, but because every camera in the city is going to be watching to see what you do next. And if you screw this up, if you say one wrong thing or make one wrong move, you're done. I'll send you to military school in another state and wash my hands of you." "You can't do that. Watch me." Richard left the room, leaving Bryce alone with the weight of his choices finally settling on his shoulders. At the Hayes duplex, Emma watched herself on the news with a strange sense of detachment. That girl on the screen looked brave, sounded brave. Emma wasn't sure she felt brave. She mostly felt tired. "You did good, baby girl." David set his arm around her shoulders. "A lot of people are going to see this." "Yeah. What if they're mean? Then they're not worth listening to." Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "I saw you on TV. You're famous, and you looked really pretty." Emma smiled. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But across town in the comments section of Channel 7's website, a war was brewing. Supporters flooded in with messages of encouragement for Emma and calls for justice. But others, anonymous, cruel, relentless, began attacking everything from Emma's appearance to David's parenting to Marcus's involvement. Why is a biker gang involved in this? Probably trying to get money from the Cunninghams. That kid looks like she's faking for attention. Disability doesn't give you a free pass to ruin someone's life. Marcus read through the comments until Bishop physically took his phone away. Don't torture yourself. People are defending him. They're actually saying Emma deserved it. People are idiots, you know this. She's 7 years old. And she's tougher than half the men we served with. She's going to be fine. Marcus wanted to believe that, but he'd seen enough of the world to know that sometimes doing the right thing just meant you got hurt in different ways. The next morning, every major news outlet was covering the story. Emma's face was everywhere. Newspapers, websites, television segments. The video had been viewed over 2 million times. Hashtags were trending: justice for Emma, protect disabled children, Cunningham accountability. At Riverside Elementary, the principal called an emergency assembly. Parents crowded into the auditorium, many wearing blue ribbons, the color the disability advocacy community had chosen to show support for Emma. The principal, Mr. Dawson, stood at the podium looking uncomfortable. "I want to address the recent incident involving one of our students. The safety and well-being of every child at Riverside is our top priority." "Then why didn't you protect Emma?" someone shouted from the audience. "We were unaware of the extent." She told her teacher. Mrs. Peterson filed reports. You knew. The crowd's energy shifted from concerned to angry. Parents started calling out questions, accusations, demands for accountability. Mr. Dawson tried to regain control. "We are conducting a thorough review of our anti-bullying policies. Your policies are fine. Your enforcement is garbage. Who's going to protect our kids if you won't? We want action, not excuses." The assembly dissolved into chaos. Mr. Dawson retreated from the stage, and the parents began organizing themselves, setting up a committee to review school safety procedures, demanding regular meetings with administration, creating a support system for students who reported bullying. Emma Hayes had inadvertently started a revolution. At the Riverside Disability Resource Center, Mrs. Chen prepared for Bryce Cunningham's arrival with a mixture of determination and dread. She'd seen the news. She knew exactly who was walking through her door and why he was coming. At 3:30 p.m., Bryce arrived with his father. Richard stayed in the waiting area while Bryce was led to Mrs. Chen's office. She didn't stand when he entered, didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Bryce sat, his expression carefully neutral. "Do you know why you're here?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Community service." "Wrong. You're here because you hurt a child and filmed it for entertainment. You're here because a judge thought maybe working with people who have disabilities might teach you that they're human beings deserving of respect. You're here because everyone else has run out of ideas for how to fix you." She leaned forward. "I don't have high hopes, but I'm going to try anyway." Bryce said nothing. "For the next 50 hours, you're going to work with children and adults who have various disabilities. You're going to help them with daily tasks, support their therapeutic activities, and listen to their stories. And maybe if you're capable of growth, you'll learn that the only thing defective in this situation is your character." "Can I speak?" "No, not yet. You lost the right to speak when you called Emma Hayes defective." Mrs. Chen stood. "Come with me. Your first assignment is working with our adaptive sports program. You're going to help set up equipment for wheelchair basketball." Bryce followed her through the center, past rooms full of people laughing, working, living. He saw kids younger than Emma navigating spaces designed for bodies different than theirs. He saw adults who moved through the world with grace despite challenges Bryce couldn't imagine. And for the first time in his life, Bryce Cunningham felt something he'd never experienced before. Shame. The shame didn't last long. By the time Bryce finished his first 2-hour shift at the resource center, he'd convinced himself that Mrs. Chen was being dramatic, that the whole thing was performative, that he was the real victim in all of this. He helped set up the basketball equipment because he had to, not because he cared. He nodded when the kids with wheelchairs thanked him, but he didn't really see them as people, just obstacles he had to navigate for 50 hours before he could get back to his real life. When Richard picked him up, Bryce got in the car and said, "That was pointless. You were there for 2 hours. What did you expect, a religious conversion? I expected to not be treated like a criminal. Mrs. Chen acted like I murdered someone. You damaged our family's reputation. In business, that's worse than murder." Richard pulled out of the parking lot. "How many hours do you have left?" 48. "Then you go back tomorrow, and every day after until you're done. And you smile, and you're polite, and you don't give anyone a single reason to say you're not taking this seriously." "Even though I'm not," Richard's jaw tightened. "Fake it. That's what adults do." But when Bryce arrived home and checked his phone, he found that faking it wasn't going to be enough. The video of him arriving at the resource center had been posted online by someone, probably a parent or staff member. The comments were vicious. "Community service isn't punishment enough. He should be in jail. Look at his face, no remorse at all. Rich kids never learn." Bryce threw his phone across his bedroom. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking. He didn't care. He was tired of people he'd never met deciding who he was, what he felt, what he deserved. His mother knocked on his door. "Bryce, are you okay?" "Go away, Mom. Your father said you had a hard day. Dad doesn't know anything." Catherine Cunningham opened the door anyway and stepped inside. She was a small woman with expensive taste and a lifetime of looking the other way when her husband and son did things she didn't want to examine too closely. "I saw the news coverage. That little girl, don't. She seemed very brave. She seemed very dramatic. This whole thing is blown out of proportion." Catherine picked up his phone from where it had fallen, saw the cracked screen and set it on his desk. "When you were 7, a boy at your school made fun of you because you wore glasses. Do you remember?" "No." "You do. You came home crying and you begged me not to make you go back. You said everyone thought you were weird. What's your point?" "My point is that you were devastated by one comment from one child. That little girl has been dealing with comments about her disability her entire life, and you made it worse. So, you're on their side now too. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm your mother. But being your mother means telling you when you're wrong." Catherine moved toward the door. "Finish your community service. Actually try to learn something. And maybe at the end of it you'll understand why everyone's so upset." She left, closing the door gently behind her. Bryce stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He didn't feel like he'd done anything that terrible. People made fun of other people all the time. The internet was full of worse content than his video. Why was everyone acting like he was uniquely evil? He didn't get it. And the not getting it made him angry. Across town, Emma was having her own complicated night. The news coverage had made her temporarily famous at school, which meant kids who'd ignored her for months suddenly wanted to be her friend. They asked questions about Marcus and the bikers, about being on TV, about what it felt like to stand up to a bully. Emma didn't know how to answer most of those questions. She didn't feel like she'd stood up to anyone. She mostly felt like a lot of things had happened around her while she tried not to drown. Mia sat with her at lunch again, but now they were joined by 3 other girls from their class. "My mom says you're really brave," one of them said. "Thanks." "Do you think Bryce is going to apologize?" "I don't know." "He should. What he did was really mean." "Yeah." The conversation felt surreal. These were kids who'd walked past her in hallways for months without seeing her. Now they wanted to be part of her story, but Emma wasn't sure they actually wanted to be part of her life. After school, Marcus was waiting by his motorcycle when David picked Emma up. He walked over to their car, his expression serious. "Mr. Hayes, can I talk to you for a minute? David got out, leaving Emma in the car with the doors locked. What's up? The response to the news story has been bigger than we expected. Diane's been fielding calls from advocacy groups, other news outlets, even some lawyers who want to take the case pro bono. That's good, right? Mostly. But there's also been some blowback. People defending Bryce, people saying Emma's milking this for attention, people making threats. David's whole body tensed. What kind of threats? Nothing specific enough to report to police yet, but enough to make me nervous. I think we should increase security around Emma for a while. Security I can't afford. We're not asking you to pay. The club wants to do this. We'll have someone near the school during drop-off and pick up someone in the area after school hours, just until things calm down. You really think that's necessary? Marcus looked at Emma through the car window, saw her small face pressed against the glass, watching them. I think there are a lot of angry people right now, and angry people do stupid things. I'd rather be overcautious than sorry. David followed his gaze. Okay, but if this becomes too much, it won't. We're in this now. Marcus handed David a card with his phone number. Call me anytime, day or night. If Emma needs anything, if you need anything, we're here. Why are you doing this? Because she deserves people who give a damn. And because if I'd had people like us show up for Sarah, maybe things would have been different. David shook Marcus's hand, holding it a beat longer than necessary. Thank you. That night, David sat on Emma's bed while she pretended to read her book. He could tell she wasn't actually reading because she hadn't turned a page in 5 minutes. You want to talk about it? David asked. About what? About everything. The news school, how you're feeling. Emma set the book down. Everyone's being weird. Weird how? They're being nice because it's a thing to do now, not because they actually like me. Maybe. Or maybe seeing you on TV made them realize they should have been nice all along. That's worse. That means they knew I was alone and they didn't care until it was on the news. David didn't have an answer for that because Emma was right. I'm sorry, baby girl. It's not your fault. I should have noticed what was happening sooner. I didn't want you to notice. I was trying to protect you. Emma, you're 7. You shouldn't be protecting me. You're always so tired from work. And you get that look on your face when you think about Mom leaving. I didn't want to give you more things to worry about. David's throat tightened. Come here. Emma climbed into his lap like she used to when she was smaller. David wrapped his arms around her and held on tight. You are the best thing in my life, the only thing that matters. I don't care how tired I am or what else is going on. You always come first. Always. You got that? Got it. Say it back. I always come first. Damn right you do. David kissed the top of her head. I love you, baby girl. Love you too, Dad. The next day, Bryce returned to the resource center with the same resentment but slightly more caution. Mrs. Chen assigned him to work with the adaptive technology program, helping kids learn to use specialized computers and communication devices. His first assignment was with a boy named Marcus. Different. Marcus, though Bryce noticed the coincidence with grim irony, who had cerebral palsy and communicated using eye-tracking software. Bryce is going to help you with your writing project today, Mrs. Chen said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Marcus, the boy, looked at Bryce with eyes that seemed too aware, too knowing. He blinked at his screen and the computer voice said, Hi, Bryce. Hey, Bryce said uncomfortably. I saw you on the news. Bryce's stomach dropped. Oh, you were mean to Emma. Yeah, I was. Why? The directness of the question caught Bryce off guard. Adults tiptoed around it, made it complicated, but this kid just asked the core question. I don't know. That's a bad answer. I know. Marcus blinked through his options on screen. Do you know what it's like to be different? No. It's lonely. People look at you, but they don't see you. They see the wheelchair, or the missing hand, or the way you talk. They decide who you are before you say anything. The computer voice was flat, emotionless, but the words hit hard. Emma's probably lonely. You made it worse. I didn't think about it like that. Why not? Bryce sat down in the chair next to Marcus's wheelchair. Because I didn't think about her at all. She was just there. And I was bored and mean, and I thought it would be funny. Was it funny? At the time, yeah. And now, Bryce looked at the floor. Now I'm here doing community service, and everyone thinks I'm a monster. Are you? I don't think so, but maybe. I don't know anymore. Marcus blinked through more options. I don't think you're a monster. I think you're just someone who hasn't learned to see people yet. How old are you? 10. You're 10 and you're this smart. Being disabled doesn't make you stupid. It just makes you different. You should learn the difference. Bryce spent the next 2 hours helping Marcus with his writing project, a story about a kid with superpowers who used a wheelchair. It was creative and funny and well written, and Bryce found himself actually engaged in the work instead of just counting down minutes. When the session ended, Marcus's computer voice said, "Thanks for helping." "You're welcome. Will you come back tomorrow?" "I have to. It's court ordered." "But will you actually be here, or just your body?" Bryce considered the question. "I'll try to actually be here." "Good. That's progress." On his way out, Bryce passed Mrs. Chen in the hallway. She was helping a teenage girl with Down syndrome practice interview skills for a part-time job. The girl was nervous, stumbling over her words, but Mrs. Chen was patient, encouraging, treating her with a dignity that Bryce realized most people probably didn't. He thought about Emma, about how he'd treated her like she was less than human just because her body was different, about how he'd filmed her worst moment and turned it into entertainment. The shame came back, and this time it stuck. That evening, Bryce did something he hadn't done since elementary school. He researched. He looked up disability rights, read stories from people with disabilities, watched videos about accessibility and discrimination. He found Emma's news interview and watched it again, really watched it this time, seeing her face instead of his own reflection. She was scared in that interview, but she was also strong. Stronger than Bryce had ever been in his entire comfortable life. He opened a notes app on his phone and started typing, "Things I need to apologize for." The list got long fast. When his mother knocked on his door to say dinner was ready, Bryce said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think people can change, like really change, not just pretend?" Catherine looked at her son for a long moment. "I think people can change if they want to badly enough, but wanting to isn't enough. You have to do the work." "What if the work is hard?" "Then it's probably worth doing." Across town, Marcus sat in his garage reviewing security footage from the school. Bishop and Wrench were with him, along with Diane, who'd driven in to discuss next steps. "The restraining order was approved," Diane said. "Bryce has to stay at least 100 feet from Emma at all times. If he violates it, he goes to juvenile detention." "Good," Marcus said. The school board also agreed to implement new anti-bullying protocols and hire a dedicated counselor for students with disabilities. That's a bigger win than it sounds. Most districts resist spending money on specialized staff. "What about Cunningham Development?" Bishop asked. "Any fallout there?" "They've lost 3 major contracts so far. Other businesses are cutting ties to avoid association. Richard Cunningham is hemorrhaging money and reputation." "And Bryce?" Marcus asked. "Still doing his community service. Mrs. Chen says he's actually showing up now, not just physically, but mentally. She thinks something's shifting." "People don't change that fast." "No, but sometimes they start to." Marcus wanted to believe that. But he'd seen too many people make promises they didn't keep, claim transformation they didn't earn. Time would tell if Bryce Cunningham was different. "How's Emma doing?" Diane asked. "Better. Made some friends at school. Still gets anxious about being recognized, but she's handling it. The advocacy groups want to know if she'd be willing to speak at a disability rights conference next month. It's age-appropriate, well-supervised, and would give her a platform to tell her story to people who can actually make policy changes." Marcus shook his head. "I'll ask David, but I'm not sure Emma needs more spotlight. She's 7. She should be playing with dolls, not being an activist." "Sometimes the world makes activists out of people who just wanted to live their lives," Diane said quietly. "Emma didn't ask for this, but she's handling it with more grace than most adults would. Let her decide if she wants to keep going." When Marcus brought it up to David the next day, David's first instinct was to say no. But then he asked Emma, and Emma surprised him. "I want to do it," she said. "Why?" "Because Marcus said maybe my story could help other kids, and I like helping." "Baby girl, you've been through enough." "But if I stop now, what was it all for? Bryce made that video and it went everywhere and everyone saw me crying. If that's the only story people know, then I'm just the crying girl forever. But if I go to this conference and I talk about what it's really like, then maybe I'm something else." David looked at his 7-year-old daughter and wondered when she'd gotten so wise. "Okay, but if it gets too hard, if you want to stop, we stop. No questions asked. Deal." The conference was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which gave Emma time to prepare. Diane helped her write a speech that was honest without being exploitative, powerful without being performative. Marcus and the club committed to providing security not because there was a credible threat, but because they wanted Emma to feel safe. Meanwhile, Bryce was having his own reckoning. 20 hours into his community service, he was assigned to shadow Mrs. Chen during her sessions with younger kids who had various disabilities. He watched her help a 5-year-old with autism learn to communicate using picture cards. He saw her work with twin brothers who had muscular dystrophy, helping them navigate a world that wasn't built for bodies like theirs. And he started to understand what he'd done to Emma wasn't just mean, it was a betrayal of basic humanity. On his 25th hour, Mrs. Chen called him into her office. "Sit." Bryce sat expecting another lecture. "You're different than when you started," Mrs. Chen said. "I'm trying." "I can see that. The question is why? Are you trying because you have to or because you want to?" Bryce thought about Marcus with his eye-tracking software, about the girl with Down syndrome practicing her interview skills, about all the kids and adults he'd met, who navigated a world that constantly told them they were less than. "I want to. I think. I'm still figuring it out." "Good answer, Mrs. Chen pulled out a folder. "I've been documenting your progress for your school and the court, but I want to ask you something separate from your required hours." "What?" "There's a disability rights conference next month. Emma Hayes is speaking. I think you should be there." Bryce's stomach twisted. Why would she want me there? "She doesn't. This isn't for her. This is for you. I think you need to hear what she has to say when she's not being ambushed in a parking lot. She has a restraining order against me. The conference is a public event. As long as you stay the required distance, you're not violating anything. And I think seeing her speak, really speak about her experience, might complete whatever transformation you've started here." Bryce wanted to say no. Every instinct told him to avoid Emma, to never think about her again, to pretend this whole chapter of his life hadn't happened. But Marcus's words echoed in his head. "You should learn to see people." "I'll think about it," Bryce said. "Don't think too long. The conference is in 3 weeks. That night, Bryce did something he'd never done before. He wrote Emma a letter. Not for court, not because anyone told him to, but because he needed to say things he didn't know how to say out loud. "Dear Emma," he started, then stopped. Crossed it out, tried again. "Emma, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you should, but I need to write it anyway because Mrs. Chen says part of changing is taking responsibility, and I haven't really done that yet. Not in a way that matters. I've been thinking about what I did to you. Not just the video that was bad enough, but all of it. The comments, the kicking your lunchbox, the way I treated you like you were less than human just because your body is different than mine. I've been working at the resource center, and I've met a lot of people with disabilities, and they're just people. That sounds obvious, but I didn't get it before. I saw the disability first and stopped looking. I did that to you, and I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't erase what I did or how I made you feel. But I'm saying it anyway because you deserve to hear it. You deserve so much better than how I treated you. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I'm sorry I didn't before. Bryce." He folded the letter and put it in an envelope, but he didn't send it. He wasn't sure if sending it would be healing or just more harassment. so he kept it in his desk drawer and tried to figure out who he wanted to be instead of who he'd been. 2 weeks before the conference, Emma had her first panic attack. She was practicing her speech with Diane when suddenly she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel the crushing weight of every eye that would be on her. David held her while she cried. "We don't have to do this." "Yes, we do." "No, baby girl, we don't. Your mental health is more important than any conference." "But everyone's expecting me to show up." "Then they can be disappointed. You don't owe anyone your suffering." Emma pressed her face into her father's shoulder. "I'm scared." "I know. What if I mess up? What if I forget what to say? What if people think I'm stupid?" "Then they're idiots who don't deserve to hear you speak anyway." "Dad, Emma, listen to me. You are 7 years old and you've already been braver than most adults will ever be. If you want to speak at this conference, I will be right there with you. If you want to cancel, we cancel. But either way, you are enough exactly as you are. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Emma took a shaky breath. "Can Marcus come to the conference?" "Of course." "And the other bikers?" "All of them if you want." "Okay, then I'll do it. But they have to be where I can see them." "Done." So, when Marcus heard about Emma's panic attack, he gathered the chapter for an emergency meeting. "We need to make sure this conference is as safe and comfortable for Emma as possible. That means advanced recon of the venue, clear sight lines to where we'll be positioned, and a solid extraction plan if things go sideways." "You're talking like this is a military operation," Wrench said. "For Emma, it is. She's going into a room full of strangers to talk about the worst thing that's happened to her. That takes more courage than anything we did overseas." The night before the conference, Bryce made his decision. He was going. Not to disrupt, not to make it about him, but to bear witness to what he'd caused. He told his parents over dinner. His father immediately said, "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because your presence will be inflammatory. Because Emma has a restraining order against you. Because showing up makes you look like you're seeking attention. Or it makes me look like I'm taking responsibility. No one will see it that way." "Maybe not. But Mrs. Chen thinks I should go. And I think she's right." Richard set down his fork with controlled precision. "If you do this, you do it quietly. Back row, no disruption, no approaching Emma or her family. You're there to observe, not participate." "I know. And if anyone asks why you're there, you say you're supporting the disability rights community. Not because of Emma specifically, but because you've learned about the issues." "That's a lie." "That's strategy. Learn the difference." But Catherine spoke up quietly. "Let him tell the truth. If people ask why he's there, let him say he's there because he hurt Emma Hayes, and he wants to understand what he did. Sometimes honesty is better than strategy." Richard looked at his wife like she'd betrayed him. "You're going to let him walk into a hostile environment with no protection. I'm going to let him face the consequences of his actions like an adult. Isn't that what you wanted? For him to grow up?" The silence at the dinner table was heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Richard said, "Fine, but I'm going with you." "Dad, not negotiable. You want to do this, you don't do it alone." The morning of the conference, Emma woke up early and got dressed in the outfit Mia had helped her pick out: blue jeans and a purple shirt with stars on it. She looked in the mirror and practiced her speech one more time, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. David drove her to the convention center where the conference was being held. Marcus and 9 other bikers were already there, their motorcycles lined up in the parking lot like a promise kept. "You ready?" Marcus asked as Emma approached. "Not really." "Good. If you were ready, you wouldn't be human." He crouched down to her level. "You're going to do great, and we're going to be right there watching. You're not alone. Promise. Promise." Inside the convention center, hundreds of people had gathered: disability rights advocates, parents of disabled children, people with disabilities themselves, educators, policymakers. The energy was positive, supportive, but Emma still felt the weight of all those eyes. Diane guided her backstage to wait for her speaking slot. David stayed with her, holding her hand, murmuring quiet encouragement. In the audience, Bryce and Richard found seats in the back row. Richard had insisted on positioning them where they could leave quickly if needed. Bryce scanned the crowd and saw the bikers Marcus and his crew sitting in the front section, their attention focused on the stage. The conference opened with several speakers, adults with disabilities sharing their experiences, advocates discussing policy changes, researchers presenting data. Then the moderator said, "Our next speaker is the youngest person to address this conference. She's 7 years old and her story has sparked a national conversation about bullying and disability rights. Please welcome Emma Hayes." Emma walked onto the stage with her father beside her. She looked tiny behind the podium, even with the microphone adjusted to her height. The audience applauded, but Emma didn't smile. She just waited for the noise to stop, then began to speak. "My name is Emma Hayes. I'm 7 years old, and I was born without my left hand. For most of my life, that didn't seem like a big deal. I learned how to do things differently, and my dad always told me I was just as good as anyone else. But then, someone decided I wasn't. Someone decided that my disability made me a target, and that it would be funny to film me struggling and put it on the internet for people to laugh at." Her voice wavered slightly, but she kept going. "I didn't tell anyone at first because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just stayed quiet and stayed out of the way, it would stop. But it didn't stop. It got worse. And when the video went viral, I found out that thousands of people thought my pain was entertaining. That hurt worse than anything else, knowing that so many people could see me crying and think it was funny." In the back row, Bryce felt his throat close up. But then something happened that I didn't expect. People started helping. Not because they had to, but because they thought what was happening to me was wrong. Marcus and his friends from the Hells Angels, they showed up. My teacher, Mrs. Peterson, she finally made the school listen. My dad, he fought for me even though I'd been hiding how bad things were. And I learned that I don't have to be quiet. I don't have to make myself small to make other people comfortable. Emma's voice got stronger with each word. "Being disabled doesn't make me less than anyone else. It just makes me different. And different isn't bad, it's just different. The person who hurt me, he didn't understand that. He thought my disability was a weakness, something to mock. But I'm learning that my disability is just part of who I am. It doesn't define me, but it doesn't disappear either. I'm Emma Hayes. I have one hand. And I deserve respect just like everyone else." The audience erupted in applause. People stood. Marcus was wiping his eyes unashamedly. David wrapped his arm around Emma's shoulders as she stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed but proud. Bryce stood too, not because he wanted recognition, but because staying seated felt like one more act of cowardice. Richard grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" Standing up for her, finally. As the applause continued, Emma looked out at the audience and saw them, all those people who believed her, who supported her, who thought her story mattered. She saw Marcus and the bikers in the front section. She saw Mia and her family who'd driven in from Riverside, and then her eyes caught on someone in the back row, a teenager standing when everyone else was sitting back down, a face she recognized. Bryce. Emma's expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on her father's. David followed her gaze and his whole body tensed. "That's him." "I know," Emma whispered. "Do you want me to get security?" Emma watched Bryce for a long moment. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't filming. He was just standing there with tears running down his face, and Emma realized this was the first time she'd ever seen him look human. "No," she said. "Let him stay." "Are you sure?" "Yeah. He needs to hear this more than anyone." After the speech, people wanted to talk to Emma to thank her, to share their own stories. She handled it with quiet grace, but Marcus could see her energy draining. He intercepted a particularly enthusiastic advocate who was asking Emma detailed questions about her medical history and said firmly, "She's 7 and she just gave the speech of her life. Let her breathe." David shot him a grateful look. As the crowd thinned, Bryce approached cautiously, staying well beyond the 100-foot restraining order distance. Marcus saw him coming and moved to intercept, but Emma said, "Wait." "Emma, you don't have to. I know, but I want to see what he does." Bryce stopped at the legal distance and just stood there. He didn't try to approach closer, didn't try to talk to Emma, just stood there with the letter he'd written clutched in his hand. After a moment, he set the letter on a nearby table, turned, and walked away. Marcus retrieved the letter and brought it to Emma. "You want me to read it first? Make sure it's safe." "Is it going to hurt me?" "I don't know." "Then give it to my dad. He'll tell me if I should read it." David took the letter and opened it while Emma waited. His jaw tightened as he read, but then his expression softened slightly. When he finished, he looked at his daughter. "It's an apology. A real one, I think. You want to hear it? Later. Maybe. I don't know yet." "That's fair." As they left the convention center, Emma walked between her father and Marcus, surrounded by bikers who'd appointed themselves her honor guard. She felt safe for the first time in months, maybe for the first time since all of this started. Behind them, Bryce sat in his father's car and stared at his hands. Richard was on the phone with his lawyer, already strategizing how to minimize the damage of Bryce's appearance at the conference. But Bryce wasn't listening. He was thinking about Emma's face when she'd said she deserved respect, about how obvious that statement should have been, and how revolutionary it had felt coming from her mouth. "I really messed up, didn't I?" Bryce said when his father ended the call. Richard looked at his son. "Yes, but maybe you're starting to understand why. What do I do now? You finish your community service. You stay away from Emma Hayes. You graduate, go to college, and hope that eventually people forget about this. But what if I don't want them to forget? What if I want them to remember that I was terrible and then I changed? Change takes more than 50 hours of community service and one letter." "I know, but it's a start, right?" Richard didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted. Maybe his son was finally growing up. Maybe it was too late. Maybe it was right on time. 3 months after the conference, Emma's life had changed in ways she never expected. The video that had been her nightmare became the catalyst for something bigger. Schools across the state implemented new anti-bullying protocols, specifically addressing disability discrimination. The state legislature was considering a bill informally called Emma's Law that would make cyberbullying of disabled minors a felony. But the biggest change was Emma herself. She sat at lunch with Mia and 4 other friends, laughing at something stupid one of the boys had said. Her left arm rested on the table without her trying to hide it. She'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Emma, are you coming to my birthday party next weekend?" Mia asked. "If my dad says it's okay." "It's at the roller rink. My grandma said they have special skates for people who need them." 2 months ago, that comment would have made Emma feel singled out, different other. Now she just nodded. "Cool. I've never tried roller skating." "You're going to be terrible at first. Everyone is." "That's comforting." The girls laughed, and Emma realized this was what normal felt like. Not invisible, not exceptional, just normal. After school, Marcus was in his usual spot across from the school. He'd kept up the security routine even though the immediate threat had passed. Partly because he'd promised Emma he would, but mostly because showing up for her had become part of his own healing. David pulled up and Emma ran to the car, waving at Marcus before getting in. Marcus waved back, then noticed another car in the lot, a black Mercedes parked far enough away to comply with the restraining order, but close enough to be visible. Bryce sat in the driver's seat, not filming, not approaching, just watching. He'd been doing this for weeks now, appearing at drop-off or pickup, staying the legal distance, never causing trouble. Marcus walked over to his truck and texted Bishop, "Cunningham kid is here again." Bishop's response came quickly. Same as before. "Yeah, just watching." "You want me to tell him to leave?" Marcus looked at Bryce's car again. The kid wasn't doing anything wrong technically. The restraining order said he had to stay 100 feet away, and he was. But there was something unsettling about the pattern. "Not yet, but keep it noted." What Marcus didn't know was that Bryce had finished his 50 hours of community service 2 weeks ago. He'd been cleared by the court, his record would be sealed when he turned 18, and he had no legal obligation to ever think about Emma Hayes again. But he couldn't stop. He'd continued volunteering at the resource center even after his hours were complete. Mrs. Chen had been surprised when he showed up the Saturday after his service ended. "I thought you were done," she'd said. "I am. But Marcus, the kid with cerebral palsy, asked if I'd help him with his writing, and I said yes. You don't have to do this. I know, but I want to." Now Bryce spent Saturdays at the center and occasional afternoons watching Emma from a legal distance, trying to understand the girl whose life he'd tried to destroy and who'd somehow survived anyway. His father thought he was obsessed. His mother thought he was healing. His therapist, Richard, had insisted on therapy after the conference said he was processing guilt in a potentially unhealthy way. Bryce thought they were all partially right. At the next therapy session, Dr. Williams asked him the question he'd been avoiding. Why do you keep going to Emma's school? I don't know. That's not an answer. Bryce stared at the ceiling of the office. I think I'm trying to make sure she's okay. Why is that your responsibility? Because I'm the one who made her not okay. But you've apologized. You've done your community service. You wrote her a letter. What more are you trying to accomplish? I want to know that she's better than okay. I want to know that I didn't permanently break her. Dr. Williams wrote something in his notebook. Have you considered that your presence, even from a distance, might be preventing Emma from fully healing? That seeing you regularly, even far away, might be a reminder of her trauma? Bryce hadn't considered that. The thought made his stomach turn. Should I stop going? I think you should consider what's motivating this behavior. Is it about Emma's well-being, or is it about alleviating your guilt? Can it be both? It can. But if it's primarily about your guilt, then you're using Emma to make yourself feel better. That's just another form of taking from her. The session ended with Bryce feeling worse than when he'd arrived. He sat in his car in the parking lot afterward and pulled up Emma's news interview on his phone. He'd watched it dozens of times, but this time he focused on her face when she said, "I deserve respect just like everyone else." She'd been talking to him. Even if she didn't know it, even if she'd never read his letter, she'd been telling him exactly what he needed to hear. He deleted the video from his phone. Then he deleted all his social media apps. Then he drove to the resource center instead of to Emma's school. Mrs. Chen found him in the common room helping Marcus and another boy set up a video game tournament for the younger kids. "Bryce, can I talk to you? Am I in trouble?" "No, but we need to discuss something." In her office, Mrs. Chen closed the door and sat across from him. "A parent called me today. She said she's seen you at Riverside Elementary several times a week watching the kids." Bryce's face went hot. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I stayed the legal distance." "I know, but Bryce, you need to understand how this looks. A teenage boy with a history of bullying a disabled child regularly appearing at that child's school, even from a distance, that's concerning. I was just making sure she's okay." "That's not your job. Your job is to stay away from Emma Hayes and let her heal without your presence as a reminder." "But what if I need to see that she's okay? What if that's part of how I heal?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Then you need to find another way, because your healing cannot come at the cost of Emma's peace of mind." Bryce left the resource center feeling like he'd been punched in the chest. Everything he'd been doing for the last 3 months, the volunteering, the watching the letter, had been about making himself feel less terrible. He'd convinced himself it was about Emma, but Dr. Williams was right. It was about his guilt. He drove home and found his mother in the kitchen. "Mom, how do you actually make amends for something terrible?" Catherine looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "What brought this on?" "Mrs. Chen said I need to stop going to Emma's school. She said my presence there is about my guilt, not Emma's well-being." "She's probably right. So what do I do? Just forget about it. Pretend it never happened?" "No, you integrate it. You accept that you did something terrible, that you can't undo it, and that the person you hurt doesn't owe you forgiveness or closure. Then you become someone who would never do that again." "How?" "By making different choices. By speaking up when you see injustice instead of participating in it. By using whatever privilege and platform you have to make the world slightly less cruel than you found it." Bryce thought about that. What if that's not enough? It probably won't be, but it's all you can do. That night, Bryce did something he'd been avoiding. He read through the comments on the original video, the one that had been reposted thousands of times across platforms. He read every cruel comment, every defense of his behavior, every person who'd laughed at Emma's pain. Then he started responding. "I'm the person who made this video. What I did was wrong. Emma Hayes deserves better than how I treated her, and if you think this is funny, you're part of the problem. He posted the same comment on every platform, every repost, every thread. Some people believed him. Most didn't. Many said it was a fake account, that the real Bryce Cunningham would never apologize. But Bryce kept posting, for hours, until his eyes burned and his hands cramped. He couldn't erase the video, it had spread too far, but he could at least stop letting people think he stood by it. Meanwhile, Emma was dealing with her own evolution. The attention from the conference had brought opportunities she'd never imagined. A publisher wanted her to write a children's book about disability and bullying. A nonprofit asked her to be the face of their national campaign. Schools invited her to speak to their students. David was protective, turning down most requests. But some Emma wanted to accept. "I want to write the book," she told her father one evening. "You're 7. So I can tell my story. Someone can help me write it down properly." "Emma, this is a lot of pressure." "Everything's been pressure since that video. At least this way I get to decide what the pressure is about." David couldn't argue with that logic. They met with the publisher, a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in diverse children's literature. She sat in their living room and explained the process, gently making sure Emma understood what she was agreeing to. "The book would be in your voice," Sarah explained. "We'd work together to tell your story in a way that's honest but appropriate for young readers. You'd have approval over everything, the words, the illustrations, how your disability is portrayed. Would it have my real name?" "That's up to you. We could use a pseudonym if you prefer." Emma considered this. "No, I want my real name. If I'm going to do this, I want people to know it's really my story." "You're sure once it's out there?" "It's already out there. The video is out there. My face is out there. At least this way it's on my terms." Sarah smiled. "You're remarkably self-possessed for 7. "I have a good dad." David's eyes got suspiciously bright. "Damn right you do." Working on the book became Emma's project. She spent evenings with David talking through her experiences, deciding which parts to include and which to keep private. Sarah visited weekly, helping shape the narrative, asking gentle questions that helped Emma process things she hadn't fully understood herself. "When Bryce kicked your lunchbox, how did that make you feel?" Sarah asked during one session. "Small, like I didn't matter." "And when Marcus stood up for you?" "Bigger, like maybe I did matter after all." "What do you want kids reading this book to learn?" Emma thought hard about that. "I want them to know that being different is okay, and that if someone's being mean to them, they should tell people until someone listens. Because someone will listen eventually. It might take a while, but someone will." The book took 4 months to complete. When the first draft was finished, David read it cover to cover while Emma waited anxiously. "Well?" she asked when he set it down. "It's perfect. You're telling people exactly what they need to hear. You think other kids will like it. I think other kids will see themselves in it. That's better than liking it." The book was scheduled for publication in 6 months, with a portion of proceeds going to disability advocacy organizations. Emma had insisted on that part. Meanwhile, Marcus had his own project developing. The Hells Angels chapter had been approached by a national veterans organization about starting a program pairing motorcycle clubs with schools to provide security and mentorship for at-risk students. "It's based on what we did for Emma," Bishop explained at a chapter meeting. "Schools identify kids who are being bullied or who need additional support, and we provide visible presence and positive adult relationships." "That's a lot of responsibility," Wrench said. "Yeah, but we're already doing it informally. This would just make it official, give us training and legal protection." "I'm in," Marcus said immediately. "Of course you are." Bishop grinned. "Anyone else?" All 10 hands went up. The program launched with Riverside Elementary as the pilot school. Marcus and 2 other chapter members were assigned to be on campus during lunch and recess twice a week, providing both security and someone for kids to talk to if they needed help. Emma's reaction when she found out was immediate. "Does this mean Marcus is going to be at my school?" "Twice a week," David confirmed. "How do you feel about that?" "Good. Safe." Emma paused. "Is he doing this because of me?" "He's doing it because what happened to you made him realize a lot of kids need what you needed, someone who gives a damn." "That's a bad word." "You're right. Someone who cares deeply." Emma laughed, and David realized he heard that sound more often now. His daughter was healing, becoming whole in ways that went beyond just recovering from trauma. She was discovering who she was when she wasn't being defined by what had been done to her. 6 months after the conference, Emma's book was published. The launch party was at a local bookstore packed with people who'd followed her story. Emma sat at a table signing copies. She'd practiced her signature for weeks to make sure she could do it neatly one-handed, while David stood nearby looking proud enough to burst. Marcus and the entire club showed up in their dress vests, the formal leather that they wore to funerals and weddings. Emma's face lit up when she saw them. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus said. "Got a copy for me to buy." "You don't have to buy it, I can give you one." "Nah, authors deserve to get paid for their work." Emma signed his copy with careful letters. "To Marcus, who taught me that heroes come in all kinds of leather jackets. Love, Emma." Marcus read it and had to excuse himself to the bathroom, where Bishop found him a few minutes later, wiping his eyes. "You good?" Bishop asked. "Yeah, just thinking about Sarah, wishing she could have met Emma." "Maybe she did." "In whatever way these things work." Marcus didn't usually believe in that kind of thing, but standing in that bookstore watching Emma sign books and smile at strangers who'd come to support her, he wanted to believe his daughter's short life had somehow made this moment possible. In the back of the bookstore, partially hidden behind a shelf, Bryce Cunningham stood holding a copy of Emma's book. He'd come in through the back entrance, paid cash, and planned to leave without being noticed. But Emma saw him. Their eyes met across the crowded store. Bryce froze, waiting for her to scream, to point, to call security. But Emma just looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to the person whose book she was signing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't hatred either. It was acknowledgement, the simple recognition that they'd both survived what had happened between them. Bryce left through the back exit and sat in his car reading Emma's book. She'd dedicated it to my dad, who never let me believe I was less than whole, to Marcus, who showed up when it mattered, and to everyone who's ever been told they're different. You are, and that's exactly as it should be. She hadn't mentioned Bryce once in the entire book. He was absent from her story, erased not through malice, but through the simple fact that he no longer defined her narrative. That absence hurt worse than any condemnation could have. But it also set him free. Bryce drove to the resource center and found Mrs. Chen in her office. "I want to start a scholarship fund." "What kind of scholarship?" "For kids with disabilities who want to participate in adaptive sports or arts programs, but whose families can't afford the equipment or fees. I want to fund it with money from my trust fund money my grandfather left me that I can access when I turn 18. Mrs. Chen studied him carefully. "That's a significant commitment." "I know, but I've been doing the math. I can fund at least 20 scholarships a year without even touching the principal. That's 20 kids who get to do things they otherwise couldn't." "Why?" "Because I can't fix what I did to Emma, but maybe I can keep other kids from feeling like she felt. Maybe I can be part of making the world slightly less cruel than I found it." "Your mother said that to you, didn't she?" Bryce smiled slightly. "How'd you know?" "Because that's exactly something she'd say." Mrs. Chen pulled out a notebook. "Let's talk details." The scholarship fund launched quietly 3 months later on Bryce's 18th birthday. He didn't publicize it, didn't use it to rehabilitate his image. Just set it up, funded it, and let Mrs. Chen administer it without his name attached. The first recipient was a 10-year-old girl with spina bifida who wanted to learn adaptive rock climbing, but whose single mother couldn't afford the specialized equipment. When she got the notification that she'd received the scholarship, she cried with joy. Bryce watched the video of her reaction that Mrs. Chen sent him and felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't redemption, he didn't believe he deserved that, but it was purpose, and that was something. A year after the parking lot incident, Channel 7 did a follow-up story. Stephanie Wright interviewed Emma again, this time focusing on her book and the changes that had happened in Riverside and beyond. "How are things different now?" Stephanie asked. "Everything's different," Emma said. "I have friends. I wrote a book. I don't feel invisible anymore." "Do you still think about what happened?" "Sometimes. But it doesn't hurt like it used to. It's just something that happened, not something that defines me. If you could say anything to Bryce Cunningham now, what would it be? Emma thought about this carefully. I'd say thank you for teaching me that I'm stronger than I thought. I didn't want to learn that way, and I wish it hadn't happened, but I survived it, and now I know I can survive other hard things too. That's remarkably mature. My dad says trauma either breaks you or teaches you. I decided to let it teach me. The interview ended with footage of Emma at school playing tetherball with Mia, laughing with friends, participating in class with her hand raised high. She looked like what she was, a normal 8-year-old kid who just happened to have one hand instead of two. Bryce watched the interview from his dorm room at college. He'd chosen a school 3 states away, partly for the engineering program and partly to get distance from everything that had happened. His roommate walked in as the segment ended. That the girl from your hometown, the one with the disability rights stuff? Yeah. Cool that they're following up. She seems like a good kid. She is. His roommate left, and Bryce sat with his laptop open, staring at the blank email he'd started writing to Emma a dozen times. He never sent any of them. What would he even say that he hadn't already said in the letter she may or may not have read? Instead, he opened his volunteer application for the college's Disability Services office. He'd been working there since freshman orientation, helping students with disabilities navigate campus, advocating for accessibility improvements, doing the quiet work of making sure people like Emma had what they needed to succeed. It wasn't penance. It was just who he was trying to become. 2 years after the incident, Marcus stood at the front of a packed auditorium at a National Veterans Conference. He'd been asked to speak about the Hells Angels school security program, which had expanded to 43 schools across 6 states. We started this because of one little girl who needed help and wasn't getting it, Marcus said. Emma Hayes taught us that sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones we fight overseas. Sometimes they're the ones we fight in parking lots and school hallways and wherever kids are being told they don't matter. He showed slides of the program's impact, reduced bullying incidents, increased reporting of harassment, improved school culture. Then he showed a photo of Emma at her book launch, surrounded by friends smiling that smile that had taken months to return. That's why we do this. Not for recognition or thanks, but because kids like Emma deserve to feel safe. They deserve to take up space. They deserve to know that when something bad happens, there are people who will show up and give a damn. The audience applauded, but Marcus was already thinking about the next school, the next kid, the next chance to be the person Sarah would have been proud of. After the conference, Bishop found him in the hotel bar. "You killed it up there." "Thanks." Sarah would have been proud. "Yeah." Marcus took a drink. "You think we actually changed anything, or are we just putting band-aids on bullet wounds? I think we changed everything for Emma, and for the 47 other kids who've been through the program. Maybe that's not enough to fix the whole broken system, but it's enough to matter." "Is it?" Ask Emma. So Marcus did. He called David and asked if he could take Emma out for ice cream. David agreed, and the next Saturday, Marcus picked Emma up from her house. They sat at a picnic table outside the ice cream shop, Emma working on a chocolate cone while Marcus nursed a coffee. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Sure." "Do you think what we did, me and the club showing up, making your story public, all of it, do you think that was the right call? Or did we make things harder for you?" Emma licked chocolate off her fingers. "Both." "Fair." "It was really hard when everyone was looking at me, and sometimes I still get nervous when people recognize me. But I also got to write my book, and I got to help other kids, and I got to learn that I'm brave. So yeah, it was hard, but it was worth it." "You sure?" Marcus. "If you and your friends hadn't shown up that day, Bryce would have kept doing it. Maybe to me, maybe to someone else. You stopped him. That matters. He still hurt you." "Yeah, but I survived, and now I know I can survive anything." Marcus looked at this 8-year-old girl who'd been through more than most adults and came out the other side with her kindness intact. "You're something else, kid." "I know," Emma grinned. "My dad tells me all the time." 3 years after the incident, Emma was 11 and in 5th grade. The video that had defined a year of her life was now ancient history in internet terms. New stories had taken its place. New outrages had captured public attention. But the changes Emma's story had sparked remained. Emma's law had passed, making cyberbullying of disabled minors a felony with serious consequences. Schools had implemented better protocols. The Hells Angels program had become a national model, and Emma herself had become someone new. Not despite what had happened, but through it. She sat in her bedroom working on her second book, this one about finding friendship after trauma, when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi Emma, this is Bryce Cunningham. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand if you delete this. But I wanted you to know that I'm graduating college this year with a degree in adaptive technology engineering. I'm going to spend my career designing equipment that makes life easier for people with disabilities. None of that fixes what I did to you. But I thought you should know that you changed my life. I hope you're doing well. You don't need to respond. I just needed to say it. Bryce." Emma read the message 3 times. Then she showed it to her father. "What do you think?" David asked. "I think he's trying. Is trying enough?" "I don't know, but it's something." Emma thought for a moment, then typed a response. "I'm glad you're using your life to help people. That's all any of us can do. Good luck with graduation. Emma." She hit send before she could overthink it. Across the country, Bryce's phone buzzed with Emma's response. He read it and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. Emma didn't owe him her forgiveness, but she'd given him permission to move forward, and that was a gift he hadn't expected. He saved the message and got back to work on his thesis project. A prosthetic hand designed specifically for children, affordable and customizable with input from kids who actually used prosthetics. One of his consultants was a 12-year-old girl who reminded him of Emma. "Make it purple," she told him. "Everyone makes them beige or pink. I want purple with stars." So Bryce made it purple with stars. 5 years after the incident, Channel 7 did a final follow-up piece. Emma was 13 now, in 7th grade, thriving. The interview took place at the resource center where Mrs. Chen still worked and where Emma now volunteered on weekends. "5 years ago, you were 7 years old being bullied for your disability," Stephanie Wright said. "Now you're here helping other kids with disabilities. How does that feel?" "It feels right, like I'm using what happened to me to make sure other kids don't feel as alone as I did." "Do you still think about Bryce Cunningham?" "Sometimes, but not the way I used to. Now, when I think about him, I mostly think about how people can change. He was terrible to me, but he's spending his life trying to make up for it. That's not nothing." "Have you forgiven him?" Emma considered this. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I've accepted that it happened and that I survived it. I've chosen not to let what he did control my life. If that's forgiveness, then yeah. If forgiveness means we're friends now and everything's fine, then no. It's complicated." "What would you say to kids who are being bullied right now?" Emma looked directly at the camera. "Tell someone. Keep telling people until someone listens. You're not making a big deal out of nothing. You're not being dramatic. If someone's hurting you, you deserve help. And if the first person you tell doesn't help, tell someone else. Keep telling until someone shows up for you the way Marcus showed up for me." The segment ended with Emma teaching a young boy with one arm how to tie his shoes using the same technique she'd developed. The boy's face lit up when he got it right, and Emma's smile was genuine, unguarded whole. Marcus watched the segment from his living room with his new wife Sarah, named after his daughter because some names were meant to be honored. She leaned against his shoulder and said, "You did good." "We did good. The whole club." You think Emma knows how much she changed things? I think she's too busy living her life to worry about her legacy, which is exactly how it should be. That summer, Emma turned 14. The book she'd written at 7 was now required reading in schools across the country. The scholarship fund Bryce had started had helped over 300 kids. The Hells Angels program had expanded to every state, and Emma Hayes was just a regular teenage girl who happened to have one hand in a story that had sparked a movement. She still thought about that day in the parking lot sometimes, still remembered the feeling of her lunchbox hitting the pavement, the sound of Bryce's laughter, the moment when she'd thought no one cared. But she also remembered Marcus walking across that parking lot like an avenging angel, remembered her father's fierce protection, remembered finding her voice at that conference and realizing she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. The trauma hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into purpose, and purpose into power, and power into the simple knowledge that Emma Hayes mattered not because of what had been done to her, but because of who she'd chosen to become afterward. She was more than the girl in the video. She was more than her disability. She was more than anyone's victim or anyone's inspiration. She was Emma Hayes. She had one hand and 2 feet planted firmly in a life she'd built from the ashes of her worst day. And that was more than enough.